Okay, so this week I was going to talk about beets because this is the time now. Happy equinox. We've gone through the equinox, so now it's our time because there's more light than there is darkness, and it gets lighter and lighter now. And so beets and things like that, we can start sowing for early crops, but normally we'd start them in trays, just because it gives us that more advantage of, it's still dodgy weather, you know, it can, I was reading my diaries from previous years, and this time of the year it says sow peas after the snow is gone, or after the cold spell is over. So, you know, it's still, you can feel it, feel the coldness there. So yeah, the beet family, the two that we mainly grow and eat are the beetroots and the chard, the leaf beet. There's mangals, which are, we grew them before. They're absolutely massive beets, and they're used for animal fodder. They were once upon a time. And then there's also sugar beet. They all come from the same origin, and they're maritime plants. So they grow around the along the coast side. And normally, again, you know, if you think of it, the sea is just rich in nutrition because it's full of all of those soluble nutrients that are in there, but it also lifts all this vegetative stuff and dumps it at the top of the beach maybe twice a year. And that's why we've got so many of our domesticated plants come from those maritime things. Here we even had a place, was it in Mullo? We had a place in Mullo where they actually researched the plant genetics of the beets growing around the coast, and they used those, incorporated into those into sugar beet varieties that we were producing in Ireland. A lot of people regret that we don't grow sugar beet in the country anymore, but I saw a couple of times fields in the autumn time where they'd taken sugar beet out of, and they looked like the Somme. It looked absolutely like wrecked. Yeah, it's a time of the year when you wouldn't want to walk on the land, never mind take a big machine that's going to strip these things out of the land. So yeah, we all eat too much sugar anyway, so it's not a problem. I'll pass these around to have a look at them. You can see that they're multi-clustered. Yeah, there's multi-clusters of little seedlets there. You can also get what do you call it? Mono seeds. So there's just one. So these are little clusters. They're beet. We normally have kind of two types of shape. You know, there's the round or tankard shape, and then there's the long cylindrical type shape. The cylindrias that we've been growing in previous years, they were developed by company for pickling beetroots. So they were, you know, there's no kind of thicker than that, and they can be sliced and go into a jam jar as sliced beetroot. But it doesn't mean that they're not a good variety as well, because they are a good variety. They're pretty, once they get going, they're pretty good at resisting a lot of things, really. They can get a boron deficiency like a lot of the biennial roots can get, which is kind of the middle goes hollow, and they go very fibrousy. They have this kind of fibrousyness in them. Yeah, they're definitely something that we should be growing and eating more of. We don't. I think one of the things is, what I grew up, we didn't have access to raw beetroots really, and if we did, we cooked them and put them in vinegar. You know, and I just didn't like them. It's kind of weird having. I'm not into sweet and sour, so like having vinegar with something that's as sweet as beetroot is a bit, for me, it was a bit weird. And it wasn't till probably at Michael's or here, you know, you're getting beetroots. You start grating it and having it in like a coleslaw, or you know, having it raw in some way, or beetroot juice even. That, before I go any further, beetroot juice, watch out, because you can get, what it does is it tends to dump poisons out of you. You know, it cleanses you. And Mary made some beetroot and apple last year, and a friend of ours, Dave, came round, and we didn't have much, like that much in the bottom of a glass, and within half an hour all of us were in bed. Yeah, wow. So it was like floored all of a sudden, like, you know, and that's what the only thing we could think was, it was kind of, you were dumping, you know, because you hold toxins within your fats and everything. And beetroot's really good at that, at cleaning you out. Yeah, growing the like we normally start some off now, and you can get early varieties as well, and late varieties. So the early varieties they don't really get much bigger than a baby beetroot, but a lot of people like they're extra sweet then. There's not that much diversity really when you look at the amount of beetroots, and there's more and more hybrids coming in, which takes it out of our limit, or my limit anyway. But I did go to a seed breeding thing in the UK once, where there was a woman from Bingenheimer, which is it's the biodynamic seed production group, and she'd bred a new type of beetroot because I had to get over it. It's kind of earthy. Some of it does anyway, as an earthy kind of sweet kind of flavour. And what she'd found out was that beetroot's really good for people, and especially kids don't like it because of that earthiness. And so what she did is one of the varieties which is pretty common is Bolt Hardy, a round variety called Bolt Hardy. But she got Bolt Hardy from loads of different seed companies all around the planet. So it's the same variety, but it's been taken and grown by these people wherever they grow it, and there's differences now. So all Bolt Hardy wasn't the same. So she grew it all out. She looked at how each variety was growing, or they're all the same variety, but each type selection was growing. And then out of that, then in the winter, she went through hundreds and hundreds of beetroot, tasting them. Because you can take beets are like carrots, you can take a chunk out the side or the bottom and they'll grow again the next year to go to seed. And so she was getting the ones with the most sweetness and the less kind of earthiness to them. And from that she got a population that was big enough to grow and cross. And so she got seed from that, and then she grew that seed up the next year, did the same thing. And now she's got a variety of beet that she's created, which is sweeter without that kind of earthy flavour in it. And then you also have there's yellow beets and white beets, and then what's the one that we used to grow with the stripe in the middle and people didn't like it?
The Italian.
Yeah, Choggia. Yeah, and when you cut that, you've got these rings in it, and every white ring inside the beetroot is a full moon.
Wow.
Yeah, it's registering the full moon inside the beetroot. Yeah, like I say, super nutritious. And then the thing is saving the seed. A beetroot plant is probably not going to be much bigger than that, whereas the beetroot, when it goes to seed, is probably as high as that. If you think of it, it's a biannual tuber. Or no, it's a root. It's not a tuber. It's a biannual root. So in that first year, all that growth that's going on is stacking carbohydrates in there, stacking sugars, so that when you grow it in the second year, it goes to flower and then goes to seed, because that's where you want all of that energy and nutrition going to. So you've got healthy children. You make sure the children get the best of the food, and it's wind pollinated. So that's why you need a bit of height. There's not really much point being low to the ground and being wind pollinated, because it would just blow into the ground kind of thing. But these guys are quite high, and that pollen goes everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And there's a book called Jitterbug Perfume. I don't know if anybody's ever read Jitterbug Perfume. And what it is about, it's about this perfume. And perfumes have 3 different tones to them: a base note, a top note, and a middle note. And this is an ancient perfume that's been going around the world, and it's supposed to allow you to live to great ages. And they knew the top 2 notes were jasmine from an island in the Caribbean, and the middle note was something else I can't remember, but they could never find out what the base note was, and it was beet pollen, because beet is one of the oldest plants that we have, especially where we live anyway. And so it's kind of been with us a lot. And I remember having the tunnels full of beets going to seed in seed savers and walking in there, and I had the same feeling as when I was in Crete hiking and I went into a cave. This animal kind of smell, like there was goats or there was some kind of animal in that cave, and that's what beets have as well. It's a really strange smell. It's nice smell, but it's also quite animalistically the kind of smell to it. That's all I can really think about for beets, really. Yeah, except like, you know, in well, especially in kind of Eastern Europe or whatever, you know, borscht. Every country, every area has its own version of what borscht is. But not only that, you can make that kind of fizzy probiotic drink out of beetroot juice. And I know years ago you could buy it in Eastern Europe, and they were big containers of it, and it was like the local Coca-Cola.
Huh.
Instead of people buying Pepsi and whatever, they were buying this. I can't remember what it's called, but it's fermented beet juice. So it's got that sparkliness kind of to it, and the sweetness. Yeah.
Is it good like a kombucha?
It is, yeah. Kids, can't remember. Tamara would know if she was here. It should tell us. So that's beets, and then I thought I'd
Do you know what we find about the beets on the farm? They grow too big. If the early crop can, it just goes too. We have to actually harvest it early.
yeah harvest and store.
And we always kind of do a second crop just to get what would be a normal size beet.
Yeah.
You know, they go for that size.
But
I saw a few there.
But I should think you could harvest it twice a year. You know, the first ones, harvest them, store them away somewhere cool. Yeah. Because we had the same thing with turnips, didn't we?
Yeah.
You know, turnips the size of a child coming out of the ground, and
we're making our.
see, this is where it all comes into play. The whole thing of creating your own varieties of things or populations of crops. You know, maybe as a people, we don't like big beets. So then what we have to look for is a beet that is quite small. You know, so we could look at that and we could breed those in, and then we could select off of that and have beets that are smaller. Like,
Yeah.
Because some people, they crop them constantly, don't they? For,
Yeah.
you know, box schemes and things. It's not something.
At least the organic ones are growing slower anyway, so which is better.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, without the nitrogen in it.
Yeah.
Could you put some water in there? Right. Don't know where my yogi bob's gone.
Oh, it's outside, I think.
Is it? I'll just grab it.
So we have beets going for seed. We're doing the cylindrical this year, and that's in tunnel 4. So all we've got carrots, beetroot,
How about her?
onions. The roots are basically there in tunnel 4. We go down. Ted will come. We go down and look at them towards the end.
Will the beetroot grow for the second year? Do you leave it outside, or do you have to?
It's just getting the seed to ripen fully. You know,
Okay.
it works better in the tunnel.
Right.
You know,
So you're looking for seeds that are inside.
Yeah, you always go with the beet seed inside then in the tunnel rather than outside. It just
Yeah, we can't. It's same as carrots and onions. In fact, you know, our weather is so kind of intermittent, and if you think of it, especially for both insect pollinators and for wind pollinators, I know that it's a problem with people growing nuts in areas which are temperate like this, because you know they're wind pollinated, and if you get a wet, especially those soft days, that everything sticks. You know, everything sticks, and so the pollen doesn't flow freely. So if you have them in tunnels, they have more ability to. It's drier in the tunnels. You can control the environment, but like I said, you know, it's been here a long time, beet, and we should be able to grow it for seed outside as well. And I suppose what you do really is like dipping your toe in the water. You keep growing it in the tunnel for seed, and then taking a population out of that and leaving that outside, and then observing what happens. But a lot of the time when you're growing, though, you don't have the time. You're too busy running, and to have something that you don't have to worry about is a big thing. So yeah, they all go into the tunnels at the moment, but we do know that tunnels are a fleeting thing.
Yeah.
But that was always the thing: is are we creating dependency on our crops to grow in tunnels, because to go their whole life cycle, if they're being ripened in, everything that you do to the seed and the plant affects the next generation, or can affect the next generation. So like squashes, you might be selecting for squashes, but if you're storing them in a damp, warm place, they'll go moldy. But there might be one or two that don't go moldy. So if you save the seed of those, then you're selecting for some kind of resistance towards the mold. Of course, you keep repeating it to see if it is doing that. It might have just been the position that those two squash were in.
At least with the roots, though, they've done their first year outside, and then they buy them. Their first year has been out in the field, and then their second year flowering into the tunnel, so they have got some exposure, I guess, at least.
Yeah, but it also depends on how you're storing it. So the onions, we used to lose onions over winter just from storing them. It was too, they were mold, and they seem to be, the weather's changing a little bit, but they seem to be much hardier now. Like they seem to have finished off, the skins are crisp on them, so I was noticing when I was chopping some up the other day, it was really hard to get that last skin off, and that's exactly what you want. It was like plastic. It just sealing that onion inside there. Yeah. And we found it hard when we started growing them to get a good variety.
Yeah.
The normal ones would be Sturon and Rinsberger and Ailsa Craig and Bedfordshire Champion and things like that. But to think that every Bedfordshire Champion grows the same, or every Sturon, they don't. There's diversity in them, even though our laws say that we're not allowed to have diversity in the crops to sell the seed. They can't stop it happening. It's nature. They just have to keep coming down and shaving off the ones that are not the same. When the attitude of growing kind of diverse crops is, I don't care if somebody else grows it over there. I want their pollen to, gather their genetics as well. Anything that works well here, and then it's up to us as the people who eat the food as to what it is that we like to eat. What's his name? Joseph Lofthouse. He grows like a butternut squash, but it's just got this really long bit about that thick on it, and then it goes out at the bottom, because his customers like that one, because they cut it and they fry it, because the seeds are only down in the bottom. So this big long bit is just a pure bit of butternut squash. So he's just developed that from what happened. And the other thing you can do as an individual seed saver is you can do things like you taste every squash before you save the seed. So there's a variety called Oregon Homestead Sweetmeat. It's a big winter squash that lasts for it should last 2 or 3, 5, up to 5 years, they reckon, stored as a food crop. You need an axe to chop it up though, because it's really hard. And what had happened is that inside the squash, the centre bit where the seeds are, it got bigger and bigger and bigger because nobody had been paying attention and selecting it. So you were only getting that much meat, of the squash, and then you had a big gap when the seeds are in there. So Carol Depe is a public domain plant breeder and up in Oregon. She started to breed for smaller and smaller space in the middle. So now you've got like that much meat all the way around the outside. Yeah. And there's another one which is selected from that, where a woman over the years would get her Oregon sweetmeat squash, and she would just taste them, And the ones that were really sweet, she put the seeds to one side. So there's another one which is a sweeter version of that. But you can tell as well. You know, we can tell through our taste, our senses. We can tell through our taste, but our tastes have been kind of confused with modern foods, with you know, all of the sugar derivatives that there are, and sugars and fats are our main thing as humans. We love that stuff. So our palate is a bit distorted, but you should be able to tell when things are more nutrient rich because they taste good. And not only that, you can see it in squashes because they start getting really kind of dark orange, which is the carotenoids inside it. So, you know, there are indicators of the genetics inside that we can't actually prove without having DNA samples of things. But yeah, there's a lot we can do. So these yolks, these are copper tools, and it kind of comes out the work of this this guy Walter Schauberger. He was in the early 1900s. We were getting loads of really fascinating humans turning up. They're all on the fringes though. So you know, like what's his name, Steiner. There was Steiner. There was a guy called Wilhelm Reich. And this guy Schauberger, Walter Schauberger, he's called the Water Wizard. He was an Austrian guy, and his family come from a long line of foresters. And so the problem when you have forests and mountains is, how do we, you know, before we had the big trucks and things, how do we get the trees from the top of the mountain down to the bottom of the mountain? So they would use streams and rivers, and they would always get clogged and whatever. And Schauberger apparently, you know, all of these people are hyper observant. They're really observant of the world around them, and that's how they came up with a lot of their ideas. And Schauberger's thing was, he would watch the way things, like the way a trout would swim up a really fast flowing stream and then just stop there. And like, how the hell is it doing that? How the hell is it just, there's no effort, it's just stationary there. And one of the things apparently was, the story is, he sat on a snake and he kind of picked it up and threw it into the stream, and he watched it as it swam across the stream and realized that the snake wasn't going like that, it was going like that. It was rotating as it moved across the water, and then that gave him the idea. So he started this whole thing of there was a challenge to make this wood plume, you know, to take the trees down. And what he did is he built up the sides of the banks and everything, and he got it so the water was spinning as it went down the river. And it just, in the end, they reckon he was floating rocks down the river. And nobody believed he could do this. And he did it. And then he went on to study other things. And one of the things was, I was saying to Fig, they looked at the electromagnetic forces of different cultivating metals. So, you know, the steel that we use, the iron and whatever. And they found that the electromagnetic charge in them was actually disturbing the soil biology in a way that it made more slugs. Slugs like that. They like the electromagnetic thing from iron and steel. And so he actually built, it's called a ram's horn plow. And so instead of the normal plow with the, you know, which really slices through it and turns the sod as it's slicing, this had two ram's horn shapes at the side. So as it was pulled through, it went down, it was sliced, and it went down through these ram's horns. Because a lot of what happens in the soil for the plants and everything is to do with the water content in the soil. It's the water and the air in the soil that does a lot of this. And so these were made out of copper, these ram's horn, or they were like these. These aren't pure copper, but the outside is copper on them. Otherwise it would just be too bendy, I think. And they reckon what happened with ram's horn and the copper plough was that they had much better growth on crops and much less problems with pests and insects. So you can still get them. So this is like this is a gardening set. You get them from Fruit Hill Farms down in Bantry, and they get them from Germany, which is where they get a lot of their stuff from, like the Klausmann compost and whatever. And these are really brilliant for working in the garden, I think. You know, this for, you know, if you want to make a little drill to put to put seeds in, or use it like a trowel. That's the trowel, and then that bit there for, you know, for knocking up lumps to try to make a tilth or whatever. And then this yoke is just great for kind of, you know, loosening the soil. It reminds me of those things the pharaohs had. Maybe they were into this kind of thing. I mean, they're not cheap, but they last a lifetime. And that's what tools should be. They should last a lifetime. We had too much Chinese rubbish coming into the country, which I remember buying a spade when I was down in, in Scariff, when I first moved over here, and going out and sticking it in the ground and it bent. It was a Chinese spade, but it was really good for cleaning up the dog muck. So, yeah.
I gotta go, lads.
Okay, good luck, Joe. Yeah, take care. Yeah, another thing with this is it's ergonomically really easy to, you know, if I send it around, you can feel it. It's light, you know, and if you use the Chillington hose, you know, they're cast metal and they're quite heavy. Whereas, you know, I'm always looking for easy ways of doing things. My next thing is Carol Deppe's quite she's been ill a lot of her life, so she uses her head now instead of her body. And one of them that I'm going to copy is, it's a pipe that is from up here to the ground, so that when I put my peas in, I just put the pipe in. I don't want to be bending over, like, you know. I keep telling everybody who's younger than me, watch your back, watch your back.
How do you mind the tools, Kevin, dear?
Sorry?
How do you mind them? Do you have a special...
Well, really, I should clean it down and put linseed oil on it, and then they clean really easily. Yeah, they do. Yeah,
Right, isn't it?
it is. Well, that's what I want. I don't my little puny.
Very bad at cleaning tools.
Yeah. And I've got a fork and a spade, but they're from the UK, from a company called Bulldog, and they have a lifetime guarantee on them. And they were the ones that, when I was in California, everybody was given a spade and a fork. And they're called Chillington Hoe over there. Not Chillington, Clarendon Forge. And so this forge has been going for a long time, but they can't sell it as Clarendon Forge here. They have to sell it as Bulldog. So Bulldog tools are what they are.
How
And
much would something like that cost?
60, 70, is it?
Wow.
Yeah. And I didn't bring these tools back from the States with me because I wouldn't have got them on the plane. So I just gave them to the Hopis. Why do we want those? We have a stick. And that, I have a friend who's a Hopi Pima, and that's his main tool, is a stick. It's a digging stick that his grandfather had. So it's just a stick with a kind of flattened bit on the end, and that's all he uses. Doesn't use anything else.
Copper staying on, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's something I don't know how. I don't know what the meteorology of it is all about. Yeah.
Do you have one at the farm?
Not a copper one.
No, they're what I bought when I was retired.
We're going to treat ourselves though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one we have is a lot heavier.
Yeah.
Oh, we have only the metal handle. We get all together.
But one of the most important things is that, you know, if you have tools, you know, anybody who works with tools, the first thing you have to do is learn how to sharpen them and how to clean them. Otherwise, they're just lumps of metal and wood, you know, and they make your life harder. So, you know, you should have a whole thing set up for when you finish. You always finish 10 minutes to a quarter of an hour before you should finish. You go in, you clean all the tools, and then what we had was a big plastic bucket full of sand with oil in it. and you just plunge them in there a few times, and then the place that it goes is up on the wall, and yours goes there. So when you walk in, where's my spade? You know, everybody knows where everything is. And yeah, you have to watch it because I've worked for people before, and things just, you find spades 2 years later because they've fallen over in the long grass. And
I find myself in the garden.
Yeah.
you have to. I you know, if I'm going to do something, I want to go out and do it. I don't want to spend an hour looking for the stuff to do it, because that drives the Anglo-Saxon in me mad. Like, you know, it does.
The right tool for the right job as well.
It is, yeah.
You can go with that, you're halfway there.
I've got a tool called a hori. It's like a knife, but it's a trowel, and it's Japanese. It means dig. And we had horis down on the farm. I don't know if there's any left now,
There's
but
one,
and they're really good for if you're putting in plug plants, you know, out of a tray, because you can take them all out, and then it's just, you just stick it in, pull it back, jink, bong, down the road. And then one year I found that somebody had been using my file for sharpening the tools. They'd been using that as a hori.
Oh.
It was stuck in the ground, the file, like, you know. Jeez.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask actually on like sharpening those. You're saying if they're not copper the whole way through, do you care? Be careful like taking off the copper coating, you know? For sharpening?
Yeah, I don't think it's steel underneath. I think
Okay.
it's probably some amalgam, bronze kind of amalgam in there. Yeah. But they're the stuff. They're Mary's, in fact, but don't tell her. Oh shit, it's been recorded. Damn it all.
Okay.
Try again.
Sinead.
Sinead.
Is it?
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, so we've just put our beginning of our landrace fava beans outside.
Took photographs of them all, the different colours.
I've got more though, so we'll fill the whole bed up.
Yeah.
And I had them and these peas soaking in chamomile tea overnight. Set them off. So there's some peas in there. There'll be these peas to go in, and these are ones that you planted out there. It's just called Kate's Dwarf, but I think it's Calvert and Wonder. Because you know, we were talking about, when we were talking about peas, we were saying that the older varieties of peas are normally really tall, and so a lot of people have been looking for those genetics in that, because in permaculture and whatever, you're looking for things that'll grow up things rather than things that you're putting down here, because you're trying to create polycultures and whatever. So Calvert and Wonder is a modern variety. You don't need to net it. You just put it in, and it'll only grow up about that high and then kind of fall over and whatever. And then the other one, which is, it's not a pea for kind of eating, it's more a dry pea, is the marrow fat. And there's one of those survived over there, but I will put some more in somewhere. And it's hardly got any leaves at all. It's just tendrils, and the tendrils are like hands, and they kind of stretch out, and then they connect to the other plant next to it. And I had a bit sewn up about this big with them, and you could get on one side of it and push it, and the whole thing was like a mattress. It all completely sprung together. And then we always thought marrow fat peas were, first of all, we thought they were British or something, because, you know, it's like they're the ones you have for mushy peas kind of thing. But then apparently they were a variety called marrow from Japan. But then I've read something else, and they said, well, the genetics is much older than Japan. It actually is an old variety that they had once upon a time. And they're all hardy. They should all be in the ground by now, really. You know, they'll put up with cold. They are cold hardy plants. And I have suspicion that the beluga lentil could take a bit more cold than what I've been giving it as well. So I'm going to plant up a 150 tray for Pat to put out on the farm, just to see how it grows. You're not losing anything, because it's the nitrogen fixer anyway. You know. Yeah. But it'd be great if we got enough, that we had enough to sow out a bigger amount the year after, and enough to actually cook up to have them you know, a harvest supper to or harvest meal to, you know, grow our own lentils. Yeah,
And they're a good enough yield, aren't they? They seem to have a good enough.
they are. They fit in. See, a lot of these things fit in around community things because you know we would probably a group of us would harvest the plants when the pods are all dry and put it onto a tarpaulin, bring it up here, get somebody who can play the fiddle and invite everybody to come in and dance on it.
Yeah,
You know, because I mean, this isn't dancing when you're doing it on beans. This is dancing when you're doing it on beans. Yeah, you shuffle along, and the beans all come, or the lentils all come out of their pods, and it can be really good fun. Like especially if you've got a good musician there, because they can up the beat. And we nearly did that to Richard Corrigan. Yeah, he's this TV chef. He's got a place in London and Dublin.
Was it?
Yeah, he was here. Yeah, and when he was down at Seed Savers, he was helping make the cob oven area. So they had the same thing with the cob. You know, when you plug in the cob with your bare feet with the straw and the clay and whatever. And Saul, who was making the cob oven, he's a fiddler, so he was playing the fiddle and your man was dancing. But so Saul upped the tempo a bit, and Richard wasn't looking too good by the end of it. Yeah. But see, it's that how do we bring community in? You know, we don't do that anymore. We buy our stuff, like, you know. But how do we bring it in to make it more than just food? Because I'm really aware that the food thing alone doesn't work for most people. You know, there has to be something else there, and if you know, and if the agricultural year had actual meaning to it, like you know, having metals to pick up the carrots, and you know, you could create this kind of yearly thing, like, you know, maybe even have a little competition. I don't like competition, but little competitions like who can find the biggest carrot, or you know, just to bring some kind of interest into what it is that we do and what we eat. You know, otherwise it turns the coach house, in my opinion, into a supermarket. You know, there's no conscious, just what is it we call it, the ever open mouth.
Yeah. It's insatiable is my word.
Yeah. All growers talk about that, the ever open mouth. You just keep tipping food in there, and it just keeps coming back for more. Like, you know, where's it all going? Yeah. Because it doesn't go back to the earth.
No.
Because we don't even want to talk about shit. Never mind do something with it, like, you know what I mean? But it's not, if you look at any process in nature, or most processes in nature, they're much more complex than we think, and they're there deliberately to cycle everything back round again. But you know, once the old Thomas Crapper produced the flushing toilet, that was it. It's not my problem. Thomas Crapper, that was his name. Yeah. You know, it's not my problem any longer. It is your problem now because you can't go swim in the sea that's 40 miles away from you.
Was he German?
Huh?
Was he German?
No, but the Germans are the best people for talking about shite. They'll even talk about it at dinner times. You can't get the English and certain strains of the Irish community. And Jesus, they won't sit around the table if you mention shit. Oh, that's disgusting.
And I remember years ago you told us where the word shit came from. Do people know where the word came from? It's a good story.
I can't remember it. Sure as me.
It was apparently countries were importing bird, iguana, bird shit into by ship. So basically, they would store it down on the decks or down below, and of course, methane gas would be released. So when they went down with their candles, you know, there'd be an explosion.
Yeah.
So they had to put store high in transit on the boxes, so that they were stored. Well,
Brilliant.
it's good, isn't it? Yeah.
I must remember that now.
Tell that to the school kids; they love it.
My grandkids talk about poo all the time, so I didn't know that stuff.
Yeah.
And when I lived in Peru for 2 years, you could not sit at a table without somebody talking about worms. what kind of worms they had. I mean, we had the rule that please no talk. Really.
But it's quite an important thing because, you know, we've codes of etiquette that don't want us to talk about it, but they're important things socially because if you've got worms, you know, your family's probably got worms and they're probably spreading it to the, you know, when the kids go and play with someone else. And if you have much more awareness, I mean, you know, what you put in and what comes out kind of can tell you a lot about what's going on inside there, really. You know, but we just haven't developed a culture, you know. I remember that my dad used to tell me there was a horse, it was quite a good horse, was winning quite a lot, and it was called Kaibo. And because during the war you weren't allowed to write letters home or to the soldiers with any information of anything going on, this guy who eventually had the horse, his mother always at the bottom of the letter used to put Kaibo, and that's what he called the horse. And Kaibo meant keep your bowels open. And they always used to say that once upon a time. Well, your bowels open, you know. I suppose, you know.
But they asked me in hospital once to have my bowels moved. I didn't know what to talk about. So 3 or 4 or 5 days later, no. And then they were getting worried then, you know. Then you move.
You can't beat vegetable matter, I don't think.
Yeah.
Meat's good, but meat has big long fibres in it, and they do tend to stick to the colon. I mean, we're all the same, really. We're just different variations of the same thing. So, you know, the more we discuss about things, the more that we know about them, and they're the things that should help us go through life, aren't they? Like, you know, cows do it, don't they? In the springtime, when you've let them out in that fresh grass that they're on, they get the scutters, like, you know. But it's a clean out, and that's why apparently we used to eat nettles in the spring. It's a tonic, but it also, you know, we would have been eating lots of dried meat as well during the winter time, and so those fibers would get into you, and just that everything had a spring tonic to it.
Cycle it, yeah.
Would there be a danger of recycling human waste due to the pharmaceuticals that were
Yeah, there's that in it, and there's other people have looked at it. The Steiner and them looked at it, and they were looking at the whole thing of what made humans human and what made cows, and, you know, the psychology that they could look at was it's our egos that make us human, because it's, you know, toxic ego is a bad thing, but your ego is who you personally are, your individuality. And so Steiner's thing was when they said, oh well, you know, like the farmers of 40 generations or whatever it is in Sir Albert Howard's book on China, and the way that they used human waste in the paddy fields in China. And Steiner's thing would say, yeah, but they've lost their individuality in a lot of ways, because the Chinese were very, you know, they were seeing it through the lens of the beginning of the 1900s, and it was communism and everything. And so what Steiner's thing would be is you could use composted human waste, but you use it on pasture where animals going to be, and then you use the growth from that. You use the dung from the animals to put on the crops that humans are going to eat. So you have a species
between
break as well, like, you know. So yeah, I don't know about the. See, again,
I have heard, yeah, something that they did some look at some place in America where they were using like human waste compost and stuff, and I think they did find that there is some like introduction of like forever chemicals kind of into the food chain there, like all the plastics and shit that then gets mixed into the.
But see, that would depend. That's when you talk about soil or anything, you're talking about an individual thing. And if you've got a really high fungal population and a really healthy soil, they would break that stuff down. You know, they've got proof now that funguses are breaking plastics down. You know, they're hydrocarbons, and you know, they're working on with carbon all the time, mushrooms or mycelium. You know, they're breaking things. They are the shifters of nutrients. That's what their expertise is. And I was reading this thing about, have you ever heard of pine borer beetle? It's like the elm, you know, the Dutch elm disease with the elm borer beetle. And so what they do is they look a bit like a piece of mouse shit, about that size. That's what they look like. And they go into the pine trees. In 18 years, they've destroyed over 50 million acres of pines in the States. So, you know, it's big when you come to forestry. So what they found out was they would bore in, and they would be living in the phloem, the cambium, because that's where all the sugars are coming, yeah, inside the bark of the tree, the living bit. But they also know, because the beetles have exoskeletons, that they've got loads of fungus that they carry with them on there. And the one for the elm tree even has little receptacle cups that the fungus lives in, and it feeds them. And so what they thought was happening was the pine borer would go in, and then the fungi would get in off of them, and that's that would kill the tree. But when they looked deeper into it, the fungi went towards the center of the tree, and it brought back nitrogen and phosphorus that the larvae weren't getting without the fungus being there. And so they were bringing that backwards and forwards. And what happened was, everywhere where there was mycelium, where the fungi was, the beetle larvae was bigger, and it survived better, and it ate more wood when it came out. And so there's this, how long have these symbiotic relationships been going on, you know, where the beetle has actually evolved to have these little cups in its exoskeleton that will hold the fungi inside there. And that's why they're saying it's really dangerous the way we've been doing things. We've been looking at little bits. We couldn't understand what was really going on. And so we've gone out and tried to poison all the beetles, and then we've poisoned everything else around them as well. When they're now seeing, so the beetles have cleared so many trees that, like in a forest, there'd be 4 trees left, but these trees weren't touched at all. So now all of the offspring of those trees will be resistant to the beetle until the beetle evolves some other process that enables it to. So it's a constant dance in nature of, you know, what's helping and what's hindering, kind of thing.
And of course, it's this monocropping then as well. You know, this one species or 2 species, and that's just inviting in all these predators or whatever.
Yeah. Dinner served.
Superbugs.
Yeah, dinner served. Get out.
Exactly.
Well, it's happening to us as well, really. If you think of us, like, you know, I mean, growing up, the obsession with keeping clean, you know, the domestos kills all known germs, dead. And I still can't understand what a germ is. I know there's germ inside a seed.
Yeah.
Why do they call them germs or bugs? Yeah. It's either a bacteria or a viral or a fungus, or, you know, you've got viroids and kind of 2-cell bacterias and things, but I don't know where germ came from. And everything had to be cleaned. So God knows what happened during COVID. Yeah. We were cleaning ourselves like mad, like cleaning the skin off our hands.
Big business anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I?
Oh, let's keep going. Come on, it's good.
That's great.